I sat stiffly on the hospital bed. My hands gripped the thin sheet beneath me. If I lifted a pinky, if I shifted my weight, any movement would cause pain to radiate through my body. The doctors and nurses were coming in. They were asking questions. They were ordering tests, but they had no answers. And so I sat there, still, and I waited. Earlier that day, I had undergone a procedure to help me get pregnant. IVF is a series of complex procedures where the doctor basically takes eggs from the woman's ovary, they put them in a petri dish, they fertilize them, they grow in a lab, and then hopefully in 5 days, they transfer the embryos back into the woman. And if everything goes perfectly, you have a 50-50 chance of getting pregnant. This was my third time going through the procedure. It went routine, everything went just as we expected. So after the procedure, they sent me home, and it was time for my favorite part, a nice long nap. A few hours later, I woke up. I was groggy from the earlier sedation and an ample amount of pain medication. I went to turn over in the bed when all of a sudden pain shot up through me. I figured I just moved wrong, so I tried now to move my arms that were braced at my side, but the pain came back and shot right through my shoulder blades. Like I said, I had sedation and a lot of pain meds, so in that moment, I sat there and thought, well, the only logical explanation is that while I was sleeping, I fell out of bed, I shattered my collarbone, I got back into bed, and somehow didn't wake up when it happened. And then I kept thinking about it, and I thought, well, maybe that's not the most logical explanation, but I didn't know what was going on. So my husband was in the other room, and being as it is these days, so I reached my phone to call him so that he can come check on me. But as I move my arm out, the pain shoots and I'm stopped. At this point, the pain is so bad, I can't cry, I can't scream. I never knew how many muscles it took to do those two simple things. The procedure had been routine. It was just as we expected. Obviously, though, something has gone wrong. Luckily, my husband came in to check on me, and he's a pretty smart guy, so immediately he realizes that something is wrong. He picks up the phone, calls the doctor. They agree, said, bring her back into the doctor's office and we'll check it out. And so in this situation, once again, my husband, he's a strong guy. He's a first responder, and so he is exactly the guy you want to have when you face a situation like that. So he comes up to me and he takes one arm and he puts it under my legs against the backs of my knee. He takes the other arm and puts it around my shoulder to pick me up. But as soon as the pressure hits my shoulders, I tremble and I screech. He realizes that he is not going to be able to pick me up to move me. And so he calls 911. And when the EMTs arrive, they will also realize that picking me up is not going to be easy considering how much pain I am in. So they take the sheets and use it to kind of wrap me up to steady me onto the stretcher and roll me out to the ambulance. And that's how I ended up in the emergency room. After a while, the doctors finally come in and they say that I'm suffering from internal bleeding and that's what's causing the pain. And they're not really sure how or why, but that they'll do exploratory surgery to identify the source of the problem. They say it's simple, it's routine, it's something they do all the time. And so once again, now 12 hours after the first procedure, I get ready for surgery. But the surgery isn't as simple as they expected, becomes much more extensive. Complicated becomes the theme of the day. After the surgery, the doctors explain that in the earlier procedure, they had made a small paper cut on my ovary, a simple little paper cut, and that paper cut had caused 2 Coke cans worth of blood to fill my abdomen. They fixed the problem. They sent me home that evening. Luckily, my husband was there to take care of me the rest of the night as more complications continued. The next morning, I woke up to a phone call, and I was just happy that I could reach out and grab the phone and answer it. It was the doctor. And they checked on me to see how I was doing, but then they told me that my embryos weren't doing so well, and that they had had a rough night also. And at this point, after all that I had been through, the best option was for them to just go ahead and transfer the embryos back into me, because the only chance they had for survival was to be with their mother. At this point, all I wanted was to be pregnant. All I wanted was to have a baby. In this process, I said I would do anything to have a baby, but I didn't know it would mean this. And I sat there and thought about the night before. What if I hadn't woke up? What if I had just thought that the pain would go away and I took one of those pain pills and just went to sleep off more? What if people had just thought I was overreacting? I could have died, but I didn't. And I knew what I had to do now. I had to survive, and I had to go now and do what my goal was, and that was to get pregnant. So the next morning, we go to the doctor's office, and in this process, they grade your embryos based on quality, and it's kind of like school. An A is really good, and that's what you want. And mine were grade C, and in this situation, that is definitely not good or even average. But we would have faith, and so they transferred the embryos. Now, I had to wait 2 weeks. 2 weeks to see if I would see those 2 positive lines at the very end to say that I was pregnant. And during those 2 weeks, my body had to heal from all that I had been through. And it did. Each day I got a little bit stronger, and soon I felt like I was almost 100% again. But there's a point in time where I realized I had physically survived, but I didn't know if I could emotionally survive if this was just another failed attempt. My body was healing, but my spirit, that was a different story. My spirit was still standing toe to toe, trying to avoid that final knockout punch. So the days crept on, the weeks seemed to last forever, and then finally one morning at 5 a.m. I couldn't take it anymore, so I got up and I took a pregnancy test, and I was sitting there and I'm holding the pregnancy test. My hands are trembling. My chest is so tight because I believe you have to wait 3 minutes, and I hadn't taken a single breath in those 3 minutes. And I sat there, and all of a sudden, if I squinted really, really hard, there were 2 lines. And I ran in, I jumped on the bed, and I looked at my husband, and I said out loud, "I'm pregnant." That was 10 years ago. Today, that grade C embryo, she's a straight A student. She's a 5-sport athlete, and her most important title is that she is a 2-time big sister, and they are all the joy in my world. She, against all odds, survived, and that forever changed our lives.